Alright, in this Blender tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a simple rigid body tower like this. Not quite this big, because I'll make it smaller for time's sake. And then show you how to set it up for rendering and all that stuff. Alright, here we go. I just woke up, so my voice sounds a little hoarse right now, so yeah. I will be using Blender 3.6.8 for this example, but it works the same way all the way back to 2.6, I think is the earliest one I've used. Alright, if you have the default cube, keep it, because we will be using it. I'm going to go ahead and hide my camera because I don't need it. I do need to add a default cube because my default scene doesn't have a cube. Now with this default cube here, I'm just going to come over here to the physics tab, and I'm going to give it some physics settings. I'm going to set it to 10 kilograms because usually if it's real light, it acts funny. If it's real heavy, it will act funny. 10 kilograms seems to be a good stable weight for this size. Alright, I'm going to change it from convex hull to box because it calculates ever so slightly quicker in box. But you can't obviously use box for every shaped object. Only for, box shaped objects. Alright, surface response, I'm going to set that to 1. Bounciness, I'm going to leave that set to 0. Sensitivity, I'm not even going to mess with it. Collection's not going to mess with it. Dynamics, going to set this to 0.01 for both of them. And this is just the dampening for the movement on the X and Y axis, X, Y, and Z axis, and the rotational dampening on the X, Y, and Z axis. And I'm going to check deactivation and start deactivate it, and that will again just make it simulate ever so slightly quicker. Alright, this I'm also going to give this a material, and I'm just going to give this a basic dark gray color. Alright, now I need to add another object, and this object will be the floors. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put this in wireframe and go into front side view by pressing 1, and I'm going to press 5 to go into orthographic view. And you can always look in the top left to see what view you're in, front orthographic. Alright, now I'm going to add another cube. Now this one, I want to scale on the Z-axis down to 10%. So S for scale, Z for the Z-axis, and then 0.1, enter. And now I want to scale on the X and Y axis, but not the Z-axis, by 4. S for scale, and then Shift Z, and then 4, enter. Alright. Now this cube right here is, well, this floor plane, I want it to set right on top of this cube. So I'm going to need to move this up so that this edge is bumped right up against this edge. Now we know that this floor plane right here is 0.02 meters tall. Or pardon me, 0.2 meters tall. And this cube is 2 meters tall. So if we move this up 1 meter, it would put it right in the center. Now if we do it for half this amount also, so it's 1.1, then it would be lined up perfectly. So G for grab, Z for the Z-axis, 1.1, enter. Alright, before we go any further, I need to apply the scale on this object, because all physics objects should say 111 right here. Alright, Control A, brings up this menu, and then choose scale. I'll let them say 1, we're good to go. Because in physics objects, if the scale isn't applied, sometimes it will act a little weird, but for the most part, it doesn't do that anymore. Now with older versions, it was really bad about it, but they may have fixed it, and anyway, it's a good habit to get into. Alright, now let's go and I need to give this some physics properties. So I'm going to go and click on the physics tab, go to rigid body, and I'm going to set this to, let's say, 20. And I'm going to change this to box. Friction set to 1. Dampening 0.01. 0.01. Deactivate it. Start deactivate it. Alright. Now I'm going to go on the top side view. Now I want to be able to duplicate these in a pattern so that I can more easily create the building. So in order to set up this so it can be duplicated in a pattern, I need to move this corner to the center right here. Now this is 8 meters by 8 meters, so I know I need to move it 4 and then 4, right? So with this 4 plane selected, press G for grab, X for the X-axis, 4, enter, and then G for grab, Y for the Y-axis, 4, enter. Alright. Now what we need to do is select both of these at this point. And we need to duplicate these and move these all in one motion so that they line up perfectly right here. Now, we know that we need to essentially move it 8 meters. So we're going to press Shift D, Y, 8, enter. And since we did all that essentially in one move, we can just press Shift R, and it repeats what we just did. I'm only going to go that many, but you can go as many as you want. But keep in mind, the more you have, the longer it's going to take to simulate. This is a very small amount right here. Alright, now we need to go ahead and duplicate this last one and move it over here. And we don't need it hanging off the edge right here because this is the end of the building. So we only need to move it 7 meters. So press Shift with this post selected. Press Shift D and then Y and then 7. Enter. Alright. Now come down here to this one right here, and we need to go ahead and shift this one in by 1 meter. G for grab, Y for the Y-axis, 1, enter. Alright. Now we're ready to duplicate these on the X-axis. So I'm just going to press B for box select to select all of them. And once again, we know we need to move these on the X-axis by 8 meters to have them bump right up against each other. Shift D, X, 8, enter. Alright, since we did that in one move, we once again can just press Shift R and it will duplicate what we just did. This is a big time saver when it comes to building stuff like this. Alright, now if you notice, we don't have any posts right on the end, so we need to basically duplicate these posts and move them over. So we're going to go back into front side view, and we're just going to just select one of these, and you can see only one of them selected. And then just press C for circle select, and then just left click to select all of those, and then go back in the top side view, and we need to duplicate these and move them over. Now we know that if we moved it 8 meters, it would overhang. So if we move it 7, it's going to move it right up against the edge. So press Shift D, X, 7, enter. Alright, lined up perfectly. Well, we still have these over here that are overhanging, so we're going to go ahead and fix those now. We had to leave those overhanging until we got to this point, otherwise the ones in the middle wouldn't line up. Alright, so we're going to press B for box select, and then just select these ones on the edge, and then press G for grab, X, 1, enter. Alright, now we're ready to actually stack the building, because the building's only, 1 story tall at this point. So press B for box select, select all of them. Now, we know that each plane is 0.2 meters, and each cube is 2 meters. So we need to duplicate these and move them up by 2.2 meters, right? Shift D, Z, 2.2, enter. And again, since we did that in one move, we can press Shift R and it will duplicate what we just did. And this is why you kind of got to be careful about how many objects you make, because once you start duplicating like this, you get a whole bunch of objects really, really fast. I mean, this right here is probably 3,000 objects. Well, no, I'm off. I'm over 4,500 right here. So yeah, it adds up pretty quick. But that's as big as I'm going to make it for this tutorial. Alright. Now at this point, I'm going to go up to File, Save, and I'm just going to name this Toot, but name it whatever you want. But I do suggest saving it. Now I need to add a floor. Now, you can use a floor plane or just a plane in order to create a floor with it, but I prefer using a cube. That way when you're looking at it from orthographic view, you can actually see it, because if it's just a plane, it's invisible looking at it directly on from the edge. So I use a cube, and essentially I just make it have a little bit of a thickness to it. S for scale, Z, 0.1, enter, and then I'm going to scale it on the X and Y axis, but not to the Z axis. Shift, or pardon me, S for scale, Shift C, and then I'm going to say 200. Alright. Now I do need to apply the scale because all these don't say 1, so Control A, apply the scale, and I need to, well, first thing I'm going to do is go top side view, so we can kind of just put this in the middle. Press G for grab, and then just put it somewhere in the middle. Go back to the front, and now we need to line it up. I'm just going to press G for grab, Z, and get it somewhere close. Zoom in. I'm going to go ahead and put this in solid view so we can see it better. And G for grab, Z, and continue to zoom in until we get it basically as close as we can get it. G for grab, Z axis. Alright, that's zoomed all the way in. G for grab, Z for the Z axis, and then it just needs to be close. We're in the micrometers at this point. Alright, now I need to give this floor some physics properties. Rigid body, and we'll set this to passive, that way it doesn't fall with gravity. Set this to box, friction to 1, and that's all we need to do on that. Now, I did make a mistake, because see, if I look at this from materials view, see, I gave the post a material, but I didn't give the floor planes a material. So let's go ahead and do that now. It's actually a good way to actually show you how to fix a mistake like this, because that way you don't have to actually grab or select each individual object and then give it a material. That would take forever. So what we're going to do, I'm going to hide the floor plane by pressing H just to get it out of the way, and I'm just going to select one of these floor planes, it don't matter which, and I'm going to give it a material. Click on the materials tab, new, and I'm just going to give this kind of a dark red color. Alright, now I'm going to press B for box select, and then just select right down the center. Do the same thing with the rest of these. Alright, now that you have to make sure whichever one is active, which is the one with the lighter color, that's the one that has the material, because we're copying from that object. So with all of them selected, now we just need to press Control L, and it brings up this menu, and choose Link Materials. See, now if I go back into it, let me select nothing at this point. You can see that that material is now applied to the rest of them. Now I can press Alt H, or alternate H rather, and it will unhide the floor. Now I want to give this floor a material, and I'm just going to give it kind of a dark brown color. Alright, again, this is very simple, materials and all that stuff. Now I need to create an object to throw at this. I'm just going to go with the old standby, add mesh, and then I'm going to choose a UV sphere. Now here's the sphere right down here. It's kind of small. S for scale, 3, enter. Control A to apply the scale, which is important. Go up to top side view. It's too far over on the negative Y axis, so press G for grab, Y, and bring it over like this. Alright, now we need to press, I'm back in the front side view, and I'm going to bring it out to about right here. Don't have to be exact. Now I need to give this some physics properties. Click on the physics tab, go to rigid body, and we need to click on animated, and we need to keyframe that animation, because at some point the animation part accelerates the ball and then it releases it, kind of like your hand releasing it, and then gravity takes over. Right when we want gravity to take over, we uncheck animate it, and we have that part keyframed. Alright, you'll see what I mean in just a minute. Alright, now I'm going to change this from convex hull to sphere. And pretty much everything else we can keep the same. Alright, now we need to add a keyframe here. But this is the x-axis right here. So instead of just hovering over this and clicking and pressing I and adding a keyframe to all of them, I'm just going to right click on the x-axis and insert single keyframe. You'll understand why here in a minute. Alright, then I'm going to go to like frame 50 and I'm going to press G for grab and then just move it over to about right here and then come back over here, right click, insert single keyframe. That means between frame 0 or frame 1 and frame 50, it's trying to move from here to here. But when we get to frame 25, I'm unchecking this animated and keyframing that. So it's trying to move to here on keyframes, but when it gets to frame 25, which is about right here, the keyframing or animation turns off, and then it just retains its current velocity, and gravity takes over and it hits. Alright, so now if I was to click play, accelerates, release, and then hits. But of course, this ball doesn't have enough weight to it to do any damage. It just hit it, and then essentially bounced off of it. So, we need to add some weight to this. I'm going to set this to 100 kilograms. And before I do anything else, I'm going to press, or go up here to File, and Save. I kind of wish they would put just the save icon up here somewhere. You know, they could put it right here. That'd be a good place for it. I don't know why they haven't. Anyway, I changed that to 100 kilograms, made it 100 times heavier, and click play. It's still not enough weight. It's done a little bit of damage, but not much. Alright, so now I'm going to set this 10 times higher. And once again, press play. Now normally I'm not going to bake it by press and play. I'm going to actually use the bake function. But I'm doing this to gauge how heavy I need to have this, or if I need to change change the velocity of the object. It looks like the speed and weight is about right. So I'm going to go ahead and press pause and go back to the beginning. Now I want to, this is why I inserted a single keyframe. I want to make duplicates of this ball so that they can launch at different times, but I don't want to have to keyframe each one over and over. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to press Shift D and then Z to duplicate those a couple more times. Now I'm going to select the bottom one and the middle one, and I'm going to come down here, hover over this timeline, and press G for grab, X, and then 25, enter. Now I'm going to select only the bottom one, hover over the timeline down here, G for grab, X for the x-axis, 25. See, now this one will start at frame like 51. This will start at frame 26, and this one starts at frame 1. All of that without having to do any extra keyframes. Alright, so at this point I'm just going to click play long enough so that I can watch and make sure that the keyframing is working correctly, which it obviously is. Alright, so now I'm going to go back to the beginning. I think this is going to take about 250 frames, so I want to set this to 250 and then come over here to the rigid body world settings. Just make sure the cache is set to 250 also. And substeps 10 is usually the correct amount unless you have really fast moving objects. For stuff like this, 10 is almost always the best setting for the substeps. The solver iterations really don't come into play unless you're using constraints, or at least that's been my observation. We don't have any constraints, so we're just going to leave both of those set to 10. Alright, one more time, press File, Save, and then click Bake. Now, depending on how fast your computer is, it could take anywhere from a couple minutes to a couple dozen minutes. And depending on how many objects you have, which there are about 5,000 objects in this scene that are rigid body, I'm guessing it's going to take 2 minutes on my computer. On my laptop, it would probably take about 4 minutes. On a higher end computer that has a higher clock speed, it would probably take a minute, something like what's it, Intel 14900K or something like that. Because unfortunately this is largely a single threaded workload. So anytime it's single threaded workload, the clock speed of the CPU is definitely going to affect it. Yeah, and while this is baking, if you click to bake here, if you start touching anything, it could cause it to crash, so I wouldn't click on anything. It's nowhere near as bad as it used to be, but it still might. I just wouldn't do it. Alright, it's about finished, and I'm going to press 5 to get out of orthographic view, that way I can get a better look of what it actually looks like. And I'm going to press play. Now I do need a few more frames. There's too many pieces flying in the air for my taste. So I'm going to turn this up to 400. And then this is the thing when it comes to rigid body. As long as you, even if you bake it already, as long as you don't save your file, you can click delete bake, change this to like 400, and then click bake again. And it saved all the bake that I had up to 250. And then when it gets to 250, it's going to start baking the rest of it. And you do that without losing. But once you click save, once you have a bake simulated, you will have to start all over from the beginning, otherwise it won't work right. I kind of wish they would handle this bake the same way they do particles, as in have cache files for it. Because right now, the bake data is just added into the blend file itself, which means when you have, 40,000 objects in a simulation that's a couple thousand frames long, it will end up making your blend file 2 or 3 gigabytes in size, and it makes it very laggy when opening up and saving. So I would prefer having bake files instead of just being added into the blend file. But I'm sure there's a reason they've done it that way, and I'm just not aware of it, because software engineering is definitely not anything I know about. Alright, we got this up to 400 now. Let's make sure we have enough frames. I'll tell you one thing. This floor should have been bigger, because some of them's just falling off, but that's okay. Alright, that's close enough. They didn't all fall to the floor, but some are falling off the edge, so it really don't matter. Alright, now let's go ahead and set up a camera. Let's select this camera. Where is my? Right there. I'm going to press 0 to go into camera view, and I'm going to move this on the y-axis. See there? See the items back here disappearing? That tells me that I need to go into the camera settings right here and set this to a higher number. I'm going to set it to 500, and I'm going to set the focal length. 50 is kind of a zoom lens. Let's set it to 32, and go ahead and set this to 90, so it's looking straight forward. Alright, now I'm going to move this on the x-axis, move it back on the y-axis. Rotate it a little bit, look up. Alright, I'm going to have that, I'm going to go to frame 50, and I'm going to keyframe that position. Now I'm going to go back to frame 1, and I'm just going to look over there, and I'm going to press I for keyframe. That way, they basically just goes like that. Then the camera kind of stops and focuses, and when I get to frame 150, I'm going to add another keyframe on both of them. That way the camera's not moving between those two. And then I'm going to come out here to frame 350, and I'm going to move back on the y-axis, just kind of an arbitrary amount actually, and I'm going to move up on the z-axis and then I'm going to look down on the x-axis and just kind of rotate it on the z-axis just a little bit, and then keyframe these, and then the camera will just sort of sit for the next 50 frames till the end of the scene. So we'll go back to the beginning. This is what the camera looks like. All right, now let's make sure that we have motion blur turned on, because you definitely need motion blur, otherwise it will look kind of choppy. All right, a little bit of motion blur goes a long way. 0.5 is almost always the right amount, and that's the default setting. No rolling shutter unless we're trying to make it look like a film camera. All right, now let's do a test render. That looks like a good frame for a test render. I'll go up here to the camera set or render settings. Probably 128 samples is good enough. I prefer open to noise to optics. I used to prefer optics, but open to noise got better. And passes none. I have this set to accurate. And the number of total bounces for a scene like this, you don't need a whole lot. I'm just going to put it on 12. And then leave the other ones set to their default. And that way, let Blender basically figure it out. Now on 40 and 20 for a scene like this, being that it's not an interior scene and we're not really dependent on reflective lighting as much, or indirect lighting as much, I'm just going to set this down to, let's say, 25 and 12. It will help limit fireflies, although there won't be a whole lot in this scene anyway. And well, we might as well go ahead and do this while we're thinking about it. Add an output location. I'm just going to name this Toot. Create a new folder called Toot. Go into it. Now, rule of thumb, because I usually have many different angles whenever I create a simulation, I will usually name the first one A, and then the next time I do a different angle, it will be named B. That way I can put them all in the same folder, and that they will be in the order that they were produced. Alright, now come up here to Edit, Preferences, and I'm going to use my 3080 Ti. And another thing, and when it comes to like interior scenes and stuff with a small amount of objects, optics is king by far. But when it comes to a whole bunch of objects, CUDA is actually quicker. The actual rendering process is a little bit longer than optics, but the setup process is quicker. I'll show you what I mean. I'll move this off to the side here. Like if I was to press, I'm going to put this on optics. Press render image. See, well, it didn't take too long. It must just not be that many objects. 6.74 seconds. We go back to CUDA. It should be about the same, probably a little bit longer actually. But see how much quicker it started rendering in CUDA? Let's see, it was even quicker with this small amount with CUDA, 5.77 seconds. Alright, so we're going to use CUDA. But your mileage may vary depending on your hardware. Alright, now I think we are pretty much ready to go. I do want to make one more small change, and that's with this camera. I want to change this to 25. Alright, now I'm going to render one more time, basically just using a more wide angle of a lens. Render image. Alright, that'll work. Now we are good to go, but at this point, before you ever start rendering, make sure you save your project. Alright, now I'm going to click Render Animation, and I'm going to use this Windows feature, which is sometimes annoying, and move us over to the left. I'm going to open up Blender again, and when it finally decides to open, I'm going to set this on the right hand side, and I'm going to open up the same blend file, and I'm going to go to Edit, Preferences, and I'm going to change this to the 3060. That way I can render these quicker. Basically, I got both GPUs working on it, but each of them are working on their own frame. That way it goes way quicker. Oh, I meant to mention this. I'm outputting these in JPEG images. I never output the video because if for some reason I need to stop the rendering process, whether it's the computer crashes, the power goes off, or whatever. If you output to images, you can always just get rid of the last two broken images that didn't complete, and then start over where you left off. Where if you're outputting the video, you basically lost all of your work. So I don't even know why they haven't output the video, except maybe for the video sequencer. But anyway. You know, I wasn't thinking whenever I created this or was working on this, if you're a newbie, you may not even have an HDRI as your default in your background. So I didn't even bother setting up lighting or anything. I'm such a boob. But anyway, if you made it this far, hopefully you understood that you had to add lighting and so forth. Because I mean, my projects or my tutorials are geared towards people who are very new to Blender. So if you started rendering and it just looked weird, it's because you don't have any lighting, because I'm a boob and I didn't tell you to. But anyway, go to I think it's called Polygon now, but it used to be called HDRI Haven, and I believe if you still search for HDRI Haven, it will still bring up Polygon, which is the new name of the site, and you can download all kinds of HDRIs. And HDRIs are the background that you see. It's basically that studio you see in the background, and those have lighting data in them, and it will duplicate the lighting of that room in your scene. So hopefully you didn't get too confused. Alright, it just finished. So I'm going to go ahead and just downsize this. I'm going to close this window because we no longer need a second one open. And now if we was to go to render and view animation, we can actually see what it looks like. But of course, it's not actually a video, it's just playing through the images really quickly. Alright. Simple enough, right? Alright. Now let's turn it into a video. I'm going to go to File, New, General. Alright, now we need to come up here, change this to Video Sequencer, and we need to add our frames to it. Add Image Sequence, and just go to wherever you have your frames stored. In this case, they're right here. Now if yours for some reason counts backwards, then you need to click this up here to change the direction that they're counting. That way it won't be in reverse. Alright, press A to select all of them. Add image sequence, change this to 400 because we know we need 400 frames. I want it to be outputted in 60 frames per second. Make sure the dimensions right here match your frame size. In my case it does. And I need to have an output location. Blender output, video sequencer output, accept, and need to change the output to FFmpeg. Encoding, I need to make this MPEG 4, H264, medium quality change to perceptually lossless, and change that to the slowest. That way it will compress it to most it can without losing quality. Alright, and we're pretty much ready. Render animation, and there it goes, just compiling all those images into an MPEG 4 video. Alright, now it's finished. I can go ahead and close this because I don't need it. Open up my file and come up here to Blender output, sequencer output, and here's the default. It names it whatever your frame range is. In this case, it's 1 to 400. Click on that, and there you go. Simple enough. If you have any questions, let me know, and I will try my best to answer your questions in the comments. Later, people.